In the meeting room, it's just 4 of us, but the audience will be watch this speech through our platform.
Okay.
And it's live streaming on YouTube as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can start now.
Okay.
So am I supposed to do the introduction, or is somebody else going to do an introduction?
Yeah, I will do the introduction, Brad. Yeah.
Okay.
Good evening, good morning for the people in different place. I'm Li Hem. I'm the president of Alberta AI. For the people who don't know Alberta AI is a non-profit organization in Alberta and rooted from University of Alberta AI research. And today we have this event co-organized by CNKI. CNKI is the largest digital publisher in China. And today we have the honor to invite Dr. Bradley Kimson to be our honor speaker. Dr. Kimson is a principal data scientist and architect at Accenture Consulting. Previously, he was a principal director at Accenture, responsible for the AWS Center of Excellence, and was ace with AWS Play Lead. He's also president of board of director for ICCP. He's a senior executive with extensive relationship management, product marketing, sales, startup, domestic, international, teaching and research experience. He also demonstrated capability in strategy, data analytics, BI, big data, machine learning, deep learning, and also consulting, manufacture, curriculum development, course design and delivery, research, publishing resources, including oil and gas utility, telecom, as aerospace, manufacture, legal, and commercial property management. So you can know like Dr. Jensen have very diverse background, and Dr. Jensen's proof accomplishment are in information security, advanced analytics, software development, project management, strategic alliance, e-commerce, strategic marketing, P&L management, and team building and consultative selling. So it's really our honor to invite a very experienced and Dr. Jensen to share his thought today. So please welcome Dr. Jensen.
Thank you very much, Liang. I appreciate the very long introduction. It makes me sound very old. So I guess that's what they call experience. So tonight, this morning, depending on where you're at, I'm going to go through something that is very big in the, at least in the consulting arena and with a lot of companies today. And that's called, what we call the AI ML, standing for Artificial Intelligence Machine Learning Maturity Model. And so I will cover that this evening. And if you've got any questions, please, I think Liang, they send them to you or to Carl, and then I can answer them or however it works.
Yep.
But I'll go through this and I will try not to go too terribly fast. So we'll see how that works out. I put my email on this. Okay, it's not okay. Whoa. Let's see. There we go. That's not. So I'm going to start out. I'm going to show you what the AI maturity model is. So this is essentially the AI maturity model, and then I'm going to go through and explain each one of these. So if you start at the bottom, this looks a lot like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So if you start at the bottom, it is where a company would have an initiate stage. So they're very immature in their AI ML processes. They don't have any signs of formal data science discipline, and information gathering is on a request basis. So ironically, even in today's world, with all of the AI that's out there, with Alexa, with Siri, with on and on and on, for all these companies that have it and where it's employed in lots of things like sentiment analysis, and companies have it around, you will find that many companies are actually in the initiate stage, somewhere between the initiate and experiment stages of the maturity model, which is kind of ironic, all things considered. Second stage, as you're moving up the scale, is experiment. That's where you have some rudimentary AI/ML processes in place. And generally at this point, folks are focusing on their historical data gathering and what happens. Basically, legacy data is what you're talking about. If you'd be running Tableau type reports or Power BI and that type of stuff. And then they do a few ad hoc tools to solve some of their business issues, but they generally are lacking in what we would consider dedicated data science teams. And I'm going to get into a little bit more of that as we go through this also. The standardized would be the third level up, and that's where you have a few mature AI/ML processes with focus on diagnostic, prescriptive types of analytics. So you've actually started to incorporate that into your mean or into your business as it goes forward. And it identifies patterns and dependencies in available data. Also, it explains why something happened. So when you start to standardize, you're starting to actually get ROI associated with the diagnostic prescriptive elements of AI, ML, DL type characteristics. And you have dedicated data scientists in many cases. And you have standard suites of AI, ML tools and products that you're using. As you continue to mature, you get to what we call the optimized stage. This is a much more mature processes with focus on diagnostic, prescriptive, and predictive analytics. So you've got more that you've actually brought in. It identifies patterns and dependencies in available data, explains why something happened, and it can help providing predictions. Dedicated teams are generally part of that organization, and there are a lot of methods that are in place. The models in this case, by that time, are integrated into applications, a lot of the business processes. And there are relatively speaking, percentage-wise, there are far fewer companies that are actually at the optimized or scale stage than you would expect. Scale is for folks that have very mature, integrated, and automated processes with built-in monitoring. They focus on prescriptive predictive analytics that provides optimization options, decision support, and insights on how to get the desired results. Their models are well integrated and embedded within business applications, and they have mature data science teams and AI/ML tools, as well as integrated with internal and external customer-facing applications. So essentially what I'm going to do is walk through some background associated with AI/ML maturity model. I will actually come back to the model and we can break it down as we go through. All right, so let me give you an example situation. We have a company that currently they have competitive pressure that is very evident. Company's core business functions are where other companies are drawing the most value from machine learning. They are not, but their competition is. So on the maturity level, in this case, they're rated as the most impactful technology by 3PLS, which is an inbound logistics rating. And then the company what's needed at this company is validated through some brief interviews that you would go through. So essentially, when you're doing an AI maturity assessment, what you do is you go into companies, you ascertain or determine, just like you would a data governance interview or anything else. You go in, you interview lots of folks within the different business functions to determine where they are or where they should be using AI ML type items. So there's over 50 ML use cases that were identified for this client as a result of all of these interviews. And on the right-hand side, this came out of the McKinsey report and came out of their Global Institute as to some of the major areas like marketing and sales, other supply chain management and manufacturing, where you had the greatest potential for impact on business problems per functional area. And obviously customer service management is the largest at about $600 billion a year impact that you would have within a company. So pretty hefty. And so Next, we will get into the fact that this company, when you do an assessment, you will go back to that pyramid that I gave you, and this assessment will tell you, based on the way that you do an assessment, you go through, like I said, just like data governance, you have a whole series of questions, you do open-ended interviews, you find out where companies stand, and you can do this yourself. So essentially the idea is to find out where you sit and what it is that you're going to need from an AI/ML perspective. So you'll look at your data infrastructure. Do they have ML logging? Do they have any ML data sets and APIs and stuff like that? No, they had none of this. Data strategy, do they have a comprehensive data history and metadata? That was unavailable. Business outcomes, was there a clear demand for ML? There was no formal intake prioritization process. ML is not usually being considered in anything that they had from a normal business function. So as you can see, as you're going down this, and this actually is a real company. These are not made up just to fit in tonight's discussion, right? So these literally, at some of the companies that I have been involved in, these are some of the actual outcomes of our conversations with these companies. And these are very successful companies too, by the way. So developing and training models, they are proficient in data transformation, more experience is needed, and they have no formal standards and approaches. The deployment of models, more experience is needed, need more version control. Deployment of models is actually one of the most difficult areas as companies start up the maturity scale, because what happens is, and historically, I've spent a lot of years dealing with companies where they've developed models and they end up with a syndrome called on the shelf, right? So you will spend a lot of money, you will try and get something that is supposed to solve a problem, and you've got an ML model, they do not know how to leverage it, so that it ends up on the shelf, and then they don't want to do it anymore because they never found any value in it. So there's no ROI, no benefit, and it's not helping them do their work. So monitoring and retraining models. There's no model monitoring, no model retraining that is automated, and everything is manual in that environment. And in today's world, the part of the irony is that is like SAS, which is a company known for years for all of the statistical and analytical applications that they have. They have a product called Model Manager, which does competitives for models out there and helps you basically reevaluate your models. And as you start to get model drift, they'll walk through, and then your models will be retrained, and or you will employ different models predicated on changes in environment characteristics, that type of stuff. So all of that stuff will come around as a result of a lot of tools that are on the marketplace today. Microsoft has put out some stuff with ML Automate, and AWS has been putting out stuff. They've also got some capabilities built into their SageMaker environment. So lots of stuff is out there to help you monitor and retrain models. And managing advanced analytics solutions. That's where ML development and deployment are not integrated with the IT processes. So there's no reuse libraries. So again, you can see this company hasn't implemented a lot of things that you're supposed to. And AI ML reference architecture and standards. They have no minimal formal AI ML architecture standards or processes. Data security is mostly focused on application side, very little to no on the data sources or data transport. Organization of people, no significant change in management for the integration, use, and adoption of ML. Governance next and ethics, no uniform standards, process, or docs for governing use of data and models for ML. And again, I will come back to people because that is generally a very big issue. The journey that you end up getting here. So if you look at model development, there's lots of slides associated with model development. They're not, there's some variation on the exact same theme here, right? So essentially, your goals of maturity for ML is to have value-focused, outcome-driven models, to be fully automated in the retraining cycle, and then faster than the business that you're doing, speed, and then economical delivery, maintenance, and operation of all of these things. So some of the stuff that you have to have within the management and infrastructure, it's right there in the box in the center here. That would be things like ideation, intake, prioritization, coordination, communication. You have to have trusted relationships, governance. Governance is very big. I do that, a lot of work on that. And most people think of governance as data governance, but I've broken down governance into two categories in today's world: data governance and analytics governance. And a lot of that has to do with a lot of the legislation and issues coming about in today's world with visualization, with a lot of the PII type of issues and that type of stuff. So analytics governance in and of itself is associated or dealing with AI, ML, DL, RL type applications. Then you have the standards and guidance, architecture, and security. So all of those need to be there. The model development, you will go through the whole development of a model and then packaging and deploying it. And one of the things that I will point out, most people that have done ML, DL type work for any period of time are intimately aware of the fact that the minute that you get a model out there, you will start to have model drift. So at some point it will need to be retrained, and then you either replace the model or with a go, no-go decision, depending on what it is and how much retraining and drift you've had. So, proposed machine learning transformation journey. You've got management and infrastructure, model development, retraining, packaging, and deployment. As you look at these, I just put this down as an example of this year. If you started down with a process, and then you would probably take at least a total of 3 years to do a transformation from being an initiate to start moving up the scale. So some of the things that you would look at are like manually deploying your models. You're not going to start out by automatically deploying your models. You're going to then, after you do that, you're going to start picking up automated model deployment. So first you're going to manually deploy them, then you're going to pick up some capabilities for automating them. Then within the retraining cycle, you're going to have standardized inference logging, and then eventually you will have automated model deployment and some automated features that you'll pick up with that. Then you'll have some of the common monitoring visualizations through the retraining elements. You'll also start picking up model feature services. And then up in the management and infrastructure, you will pick up audit log extraction tools. You'll pick up history from audit logs as needed. You'll do change data capture. And you'll start doing feature stores. And then you'll have new history capture that is needed it. And you'll see as you keep going through this, you have lots and lots of things here. The one thing, and I will start talking about that. So you'll have data science, named data science liaisons, and then you'll have no data scientist that is working alone. As you start through the evolution of machine learning with your people, a lot of organizations I see have gone out and they've decided that the proper way to do machine learning and get you from the initiate all the way up to scale is they will put together a data science organization. And the problem with that is when you put in essentially a standalone organization versus taking data scientists and integrating them individually within organizations as a start, is that the data science organization, when you build it as a standalone organization, generally does not possess the knowledge, the experience, and the understanding of the culture, the environment that they're walking into, because generally are hiring them from the outside. You're better off if you hire a data scientist and embed them in an existing organization, because then you'll have DBAs, you'll have data engineers, you'll have all of this other support for a given data scientist, and they will perform much better. And you will actually move up the scale much faster, and you will have a much higher, generally speaking, much higher success rate than if you just went out and created your organization. It doesn't say that you leave these people out in each of the individual organizations, but what I found is that if you put them out in the silo, they're not integrated, they don't understand The data warehouse, they don't understand a lot of the things that it takes time to come up the power curve with a company. And if they're in their own organization, most times, not all, but most times are also considered outsiders. So it does help to integrate them. Technology, as you keep going through, in this case, I did Azure, it could be AWS, it could be GCP. You'll build in the ML tools, you'll build up a template library as you go forward. And then you keep going on and keep adding more and more stuff to this. You'll end up with reuse libraries and stuff like that. So that'll take you there. So this is a change. And one of the things that you have to answer is where you are. Another major portion of the maturity model and just the evolution of your company or any company as they move into building up artificial intelligence is to have change management, is to move their impacted groups as quickly and effectively as possible to being committed to the desired state of change with minimal business risk. So the very first thing that you have from a commitment perspective is you have to have awareness so that they know about the changes and how they will impact them and their team. Then the next thing that they have to have is they have to have a desire. They have to think that this is worthwhile and they want to participate and support the change. So understand you have to have a champion, have to have some people up and down the line that are willing to make this work. And then you have to know how to participate by changing how you work and how we do the business. So that one is extremely important because that also leads to the implementation. Like I said, a big problem is I've seen a lot of teams and a lot of companies, they'll go out and they'll develop models at the initiate stage. So they're going to solve the problem. They hire a bunch of data scientists, they find a problem, they provide a solution to that problem, and they find one of several things. They go to implement that solution and it's not used, so it essentially ends up on the shelf. They go to implement the solution and the client no longer wants it. The client hasn't been involved in it, or the client doesn't know how to use it on a daily basis. So one of the things in the knowledge is also a passing of the knowledge and working with the folks in the field, so to speak, or the people that are going to be the end users. So if you are part of the data science team or data scientist that's part of another group that has built these solutions, that knowledge that you have on how this is going to function needs to be passed on in a collaborative effort to the end users, the people that are going to be using this on a regular basis. And then the next thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have the skills needed and make sure that you're equipped to do your job differently. And then this is how we do things at the company that we just talked about. All right, so here's the way that you do this. You slow down to go fast, right? Because a lot of times, as with a cart here with square wheels, folks have got so much that they're going on. They've got the solutions. They're too busy to stop and look at the way that things could work much, much better. And so that's the idea. When you start with data science and you try to do from the initiate to the scale, you need to make sure that you bring all of the people that are associated with this along for the journey or the ride with you so that they become part of the solution and not a part of the problem. So the purpose of change management, which is an integral part of all of this that you're doing, is that you'll have a current environment. You will go through a transition, and then you will end up with this future environment leveraging AI. And ML, DL, RL are all within the AI umbrella. So essentially, I'm just going to say AI. So the future, you have AI, and then you'll have the benefits. The reality is you'll have a current environment. Your transition is not full. It's got a lot of ups and downs, hills and valleys, and it's a rocky road. And your future has a lot of holes in it. It really does. So some of the stuff that you have to figure out is on the current environment, take the current situation, you take those elements that you can do transition with, and then you pick those things for the future. So plans drive your individual behavior. So change management plans and deliverables versus individual outcomes. So if you look, things like communications, sponsor roadmap, and coaching plans all impact awareness. You have things like the sponsor roadmap and coaching plan and resistance management plans that impact desire. So as you start down this, no one maps just one-to-one. They all have an integration with lots of different individual outcomes that you have as you're going through all of this. Your change management involves your communications planning, it involves sponsorship roadmaps, it involves a coaching plan to help clients get there, a resistance management plan, because there will be people that resist this. I worked with one company a few years back that they had been using Excel spreadsheets for all the stuff that we put out some machine learning models that would save the company hundreds of millions of dollars when employed, but they were very comfortable using what it was that they were. And then you have to have a training plan. Part of the training plan I call is an implementation plan. As you give it to clients or your end users, you have to have a training plan, but you also have to sit with them and make sure that they incorporate it into their daily, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly types of activities. All right, so let me go back to the AI/ML model. If you look at it, most companies end up or start out at the initiate stage. I can't remember which company it may have been, McKinsey or Gartner or Forrester, that put out a study that basically said that of all the companies, they do have some AI in very select areas. So most companies do use some form of AI in their call center environment, whether it's bots or whatever it is that they're using. But a lot of them have AI software that they're using to help, and they do get ROI in most cases for customer support. But as far as throughout the rest of the company, probably 19% of the major companies out there have any AI or ample AI that is providing them with ROI, and they're actually moving up this maturity model towards scale. So the idea is, as we start through this, companies truly do need to sit back and take a look at what it is that they need to go from initiate to experiment. So I'm a company that's the initiate stage. The things that I will be looking at is I will probably bring in some consulting data scientists, or I'll bring in some data scientists and put them in the organizations where I'm trying to build up some AI/ML processes and then establish some of the ground rules. And so that will help me move from the initiate to the experiment, probably the quickest, easiest, and cheapest way to do it, right? So instead of building an organization, start by integrating people that you want to bring you up the maturity model within the individual organizations and show some successes. And then what that will do is you'll be able to get your rudimentary AI/ML processes in place. You can focus on your historical data gathering and what has happened. And then you can start building some ad hoc tools to solve some of your business issues. And you can leverage some of the tools and capabilities that exist. So for example, ML Automate has a bunch of stuff that's already built in from the Azure side. Power BI launched some stuff where they have some ML models that are pre-built into the Power BI suite right now, or you can bring them in externally. If you look at SageMaker a year or two ago, I think was up to 12 ML models that were pre-baked into SageMaker from AWS. So as you start up this ladder, start thinking of the things that you would do. And again, this talks about dedicated data science teams. That does not mean that necessarily that at the experiment stage, you go out and create a data science organization, but it does say within organizations, you have data scientists that are dedicated to the problems within that organization. Then when you do get to the standardize side, you could be in the same boat with your data scientists, or when you start to get to standardized, you probably have enough of a body of data scientists, you probably have interacted and interfaced with enough organizations that you can actually start bringing together a collection or an organization comprised of data scientists so that you can leverage them a little bit more across the various areas of the corporation. And so you'll have standard suites of AI ML tools. There are a lot that exist out there today that you can buy off the shelf. You don't need to be a true diehard data scientist to pick up some of these standard suites of AI ML tools. And they're in every one of the platforms. So you can pick those up. Makes it much, much easier for folks than having to go out, hire a data scientist, develop models from scratch, implement them, and then find out nobody's using them. As you get, again, the next step would be, after you've standardized, is to start optimizing. So you can focus on very specific diagnostic, prescriptive, predictive types of analytics. You will have a dedicated team. You'll have some strong, solid methods in place. And the models that are being integrated into application and business processes are being leveraged or employed, and you're getting discernible, notable ROI out of them as you're going. So when you start getting to the optimize, a lot of times companies by that time have their own data science organizations. They've gotten a lot larger. The company's starting to see a lot of value for the analytics that they're doing. When you get to the scale, then you become what everybody else wants to be, which they want to compete against you because you're at the top of the scale. You're leveraging and getting competitive advantage out of AI/ML. You're getting better decisions made. You're using the tools when, where, and how they should be used. You're getting insights. You're getting desired results, and then you're leveraging tools as well as models are being integrated and embedded within your business applications. So this is a great place for you folks to eventually get to, is that. If you look at some of your dimensions that are associated with AI/ML, infrastructure and engineering, your data infrastructure standards are documented to support the various models per client needs, the cloud or on-premise or in a hybrid environment. A lot of clients start on-prem. I've got a lot of clients last several years that have been on-prem and are in the process of moving to the cloud. One of the reasons they're moving to the cloud is as they start to want to implement or have started to implement AI/ML, they find out that computing power, the capabilities are better served in the cloud. So you need the infrastructure standards, and you need them to be documented in order to support the various models and that migration. And you can either start on-prem. A lot of companies I've dealt with are actually doing hybrid, and then they have a timeline where they're going to cut over and put everything in the cloud. You need a data strategy. That's where your methods and processes that are in place to identify, collect, retain required data to support your AI/ML efforts. You generally put it, there's an ML Redshift right now. So AWS actually modified their Redshift so that they have one that is oriented towards ML models. So have a data strategy, how you're going to handle it, how you're going to go through the ETL process to make sure that the data is cleansed in an appropriate manner to provide you the greatest benefit for the models that you've created. Your business outcomes, you need the methods and processes to be in place to identify the business use cases with generally the highest business value. So find out, when I always go into a client, when I always work with this, either from a research perspective or dealing with a client, I always start out by trying to figure out what key executives' pain points are. So essentially what's keeping people up at night. And those are the items that I address to try and resolve problems for clients. Then you develop and train models. So there are standards, methods, and procedures in place to develop, train, and evaluate models that best fit the given problem that you have. That includes things like making end users aware of the fact that once a model gets out there, yes, it will learn. Yes, there's all of the learning in there. There's also drift. So models are not forever. They will start to break down at some point. And generally speaking, there are conditions that change that impact the performance of a model. So you have to go back and continue to essentially retrain and work with models. So the deployment of models, you should have methods and processes in place to optimize the models for performance, make sure they're integrated into the apps and business processes, and then manage the models as an asset. And by integrated doesn't mean that you just drop them in there and a client or an end user can essentially not leverage them. What you need to do is make sure that they are leveraging the models, not that you've just deployed them. It's one thing I think that's always missing in our maturity dimensions. We should deploy models and make sure people that are supposed to be using them are using them. So then you have to monitor and retrain models. Models always need to be retrained. Models and processes in place to monitor data consistency, model accuracy, and then retrain models as that is needed. So either conditions change, some of the factors feeding it change. A lot of things could impact the need to monitor and retrain your models. Managing your advanced analytics solutions, you need to have some methods and processes in place to make these cost efficient from a management perspective, both for your existing and your future models and solutions. Because if it's not cost effective, if it's not providing ROI, end users will not leverage it. So it has to be discernible benefit to the client. Your AI ML reference architecture and standards. They need to be well-defined AI ML reference architecture and is documented and supported by standards and definitions. Data security. And this is extremely important in today's world. There have been enough folks that have had issues here. We could spend all night on this, but you need to have well-defined security architecture that is documented and in place to address on-premise, cloud, and hybrid AI/ML environments. And then your people. I did go through this and I will keep going through this. You need to have well-defined processes to support organizational behaviors, change management processes, support the data-driven scientific business, change framework. The people themselves that you hire, I would, if you're in the initiator, the lower stages, then you should probably embed them within individual organizations. As you move up the hierarchy, then you can start thinking about or getting to a point where you can start breaking them out into their own organization. And then they can essentially share amongst themselves the technology and the changes. And then governance and ethics. Key governance and ethics processes and principles are documented and formalized across the organization. One thing that I do find is that in our field, pretty much there's nobody likes to document. So there should be a formal process for doing that, and it should be well documented, and all of the stuff that you're doing should be documented also. So the other thing that you need to do is you should ensure that you have an investment. So as you start through this, it should be woven into your business process. The rules and the roles of what you're going to have and who will adopt those roles, the business problem that you're trying to solve, and generally look at one, as you're starting out, look at ones that bring the greatest ROI and keep the folks that you're doing this for, so essentially your champions, the problems that keep them up at night is generally the ones I look for. And then make sure that you have adoption scenarios. So whatever it is that you're doing is easily enough to be adopted by the end users. Make sure there are definitely strategic benefits that the end users, the people actually leveraging this, and your sponsors or executives are able to see the strategic benefits, the ROI associated with this. And then you should have the desired analysis or reporting. So you've got it with dashboards. However you're reporting this out, make sure that it is clearly understandable and workable by the end users and by management. Also, do not forget to monitor the adoption of this. And then you need to measure the lift that you get in association with this. Essentially, find out what benefits are and tout those. And then have management accountability that's associated with all of this. So machine learning, proof of value stages and gates, I put this in here. That's the best way for most folks to start machine learning. It's focused on defining your business problem, then understanding and acquiring your data, modeling and evaluation. The objectives for each one of the steps are described in this chart that I have below. And there are 2 gates to go through. Gate A is for the business case, which is strong enough and sufficient data available in order to just go down this process to start with. If there isn't, stop. Does the model for gate B show enough promise, or to either continue to refine it or to conduct an experiment with it? So a lot of times what'll happen is you'll do a business objectives workshop. You'll find out what the subject's behavior and motivation is. You will find out what interventions that can be applied to the business. So trying to determine whether there is a need to do this. Then what you'll find is data acquisition and understanding. So you'll get your business stakeholders and IT team together, and you'll make sure that you can identify and acquire the available data, and then it can represent the concepts discussed in the workshop. And these will become the model inputs or features that you do. If you can't get those first 2 items done, you will not be successful. You will not deliver a model. You can, then you move to the next thing. You'll use available data to create the model and fine tune it to best accomplish business objectives. So again, data preparation and modeling, make sure that the data is good and will provide you with value add. Data has a lot of gaps in it or incorrect data, then you do not get effective models with good value add and good ROI. And then model evaluation, present the results of the model, discuss the model for accuracy, influence of important features, business insights, and expected business performance improvements. So you really need to understand what the impact, what the change is going to be associated with doing models. Okay, that pretty much covers what I have from my presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
So there you go.
Thank you, Dr. Jason, to share the overview and introduce the AI maturity model to our audience.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so we have a few questions, and we will go through one by one. So one typical problem for the AI ML solution, it's we put in some effort on the prototyping, and the prototyping looks promising, but it's oftentimes a struggle to make it to scale up and putting into production. Probably it's prototyping the POC. Its proof of concept looks promising, but then it's stopping there and never moving forward. So for such kind of common situation, what's your advice or suggestion based on your experience?
So that's a really great question, and that really is a major stumbling block that most companies experience, actually. So what happens is several things, right? There are 2 things that you can build. You can build a proof of value or proof of concept. A proof of value cannot ever be grown up into an end user type item. A proof of concept generally has the elements that show that you can do this on a small scale and that you will have to go back and adjust it in order to scale out. What you need to do to make a proof of concept successful is you need to find an end user or some small body of end users and get it integrated into their activities, whether it be daily, weekly, bi-weekly, whatever. Make sure that they have integrated it in. And essentially what I normally do with people as we build these is I will take a model, and if I'm doing it for you, Ling, I will basically sit down with you and make sure that you're using that model until you get comfortable with it, right? It's not that I'm going to walk through, show you how to use it, and then leave. I will sit there with you as you're using it so that you become comfortable with it. Because what happens is if I show you how to use it, turn it over to you, and I leave, you essentially put it in your desk drawer, take out what it is that you're comfortable with, and it never goes further. So, but if I sit there with you for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, depends on the nature and the complexity of the model, what happens is you get to the point at some point where it kicks in and you go, well, this saves me so much time. It's so much more accurate. I get so much more out of this. And then you become a champion for your peers. And that is how you basically, that doesn't mean you don't have to go back and modify or rewrite, but it does give you the body of support to get people behind you to get it implemented. And the problem that we have is we believe that we can develop a model, drop it in somebody's lap, and they're just going to be as awed with that model as I am. I developed it. It's really cool. And most end users are not going, this is really cool. I've been doing it this way for 20 years. I know it works. It works every single time, and it doesn't take me that long. And I get great value out of it. I can predict retail pump pricing. I can do I can do all of these different things, right? So if you have something, depending on the complexity of it, you need to have an implementation plan or a training / implementation plan that gets people on board. And that is sort of like security. We all want to do security and documentation after we're done developing something. We want to get, we figure we will go through all of this cool work to develop a model. We know it's cool, it works, and all the rest of that. We don't work with the end user to get them on board. And that is a major problem. It truly is.
Yeah. To echo you a little bit, I think it's really important. People are relying on this new AI and ML tool we develop. Like it becomes their day-to-day kind of tool they use. Before, like they probably using Excel or this kind of tool, but now they kind of switching over and use it day-to-day, and also developing some kind of power user who is being the evangelist. Then he can do the internal promoting and pushing that forward.
Yep.
Yeah.
The other thing I find that's interesting is and it's not to pick on Microsoft or Amazon or Google, but a lot of times as they build these automated tools that you don't need a data scientist for, because, you can get this regression, or you can get, it'll do whatever, right? So you pick whatever ML type capability that you want. And then essentially you give a brief explanation and an end user can go, I can implement that. And they just feed a bunch of variables and it'll work, but it probably doesn't always work properly because they really don't understand how a model works, right? So it's like doing a time series type model. They don't necessarily understand all the things behind it or all the factors that could actually leverage, and they could get a lot of benefit out of it.
Yeah, I think it's always the people, it's always the people make the difference, people make the things happen. So I think there's also different kind of organizations. Some organizations, they already have a lot of software engineers, software developer. They are very techy. They can do a lot of advanced things by themselves in-house. And there's also in another spectrum, there's some company they probably don't have very high tech like software engineering who can writing code this kind of stuff. So for like these two different extreme, like one is extreme like Google, Microsoft, they are very high tech company. Another extreme is like for the traditional company, they don't have a lot of IT folks, or they don't have people can writing code. So, and also there's many in the between, right? For this kind of like a big spectrum, like what different advice you will give in, especially for the spectrum on the right side, I mean, with less technical people.
That's a great question. I've got lots of answers for that. So if you don't have a lot of technical folks and you're trying to remain competitive, one of the things that you can do is, in today's world, there are a lot of ML-based tools that are automated and built in that on the simplest level do not need a data scientist or data scientist level type individual to build and implement them. That said, they may not, because of your lack of understanding, provide you either with the correct information or the most robust ROI. So if you're in that situation where you're not feeling that you're getting the most value, the second thing I would recommend is potentially getting some type of external company, a consulting company, to come in, develop the models for you, teach you what it is that you need to do to maintain them, and then you will get greater return and a better understanding of how and why they implemented what models they did to give you a better competitive advantage, or better predictives, or better prescriptive type of performance that you're looking for. So if you're doing predictive for down or churn or maintenance or whatever it is that you have, you can work, and these folks can come in, because you won't need them forever on your staff, or you can have a managed services contract with them, or you can get some folks that aren't at that same level but can maintain the solutions that they've developed for you and that you've implemented. But at some point, and that point varies, depends on the complexity of the model, you should review models and determine whether or not they're still appropriate, how much drift they've had. So models will always have a certain amount of drift. And like I said, one of the examples I use, because I know about it, SAS uses something called Model Manager. And essentially they will take like 5 different models and they will determine which one performs the best. And that's the one that you should implement. You could run that same competition a year later, and one of the lower models, one that came in 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, based on changes in the space, causes it to have different impacts on the variables, or different variables that you're bringing in. And so a different model may actually bubble to the top and perform better for you.
Yeah, I did saw like one example, like for like speech recognition, this kind of thing. Like all the big company, they already providing a lot of like, basically like if you build something by yourself, it's not compatible with like something produced by AWS, Microsoft, or Google, right? So
yeah, so I mean, like, yeah, you're right. I mean, if you look, they all have it, right? So GCP has it, AWS has it, Azure has it. If you look at AWS, you have Lex and Poly, right? So you have voice to text, text to voice that they've already got built in. And Google actually has a very good voice to text to voice translator. So, I mean, and so does Microsoft. So all of these companies they've built stuff that you probably will be lucky to equal, let alone perform better. And in most cases, all of them, they're essentially free, as far as you don't have to pay for the application. You just have to pay for the utilization of the environment. So whether it's Azure, AWS or GCP. And it's still cheaper than you going out and trying to figure this stuff out.
Yeah, hopefully more and more this kind of thing will out of there. Right now, one example I saw is like the speech recognition, definitely out of the box. It's already working really well. You don't have to do much work, then can embed into your business process and leveraging that. Yeah.
I did a webinar probably a year ago in China. And I actually listened on both sides. So my speech was translated into Chinese, into Mandarin. As I was speaking, obviously I had a bit of a delay, but my speech was translated. And then when they were speaking to me, it was translated in very accurate English. So it was much better than when I worked for Microsoft 10 years ago as part of Microsoft Research, and we tried that same stunt. So it has come a long way in the last 10, 15 years.
Oh yeah, that technology is very, very mature and it's very good. And most of the major conference leverage that technology already, in China. Yep. Yeah. Okay, so my next question is the AI ML solution, it's kind of another IT solution, right? So it's just another new kind of technology or solution for the business. So compared to the traditional IT solution, so what's keep the same? Like we have a lot of experience to implementing traditional IT experience, either it's SaaS, it's cloud, or the on-premise solution. But now, like we are jumping into the AI ML solution. It's kind of just another new type of solution, right? So what's like when we implementing a new solution with a new technology like AI ML, what's keep the same as the traditional IT solution, and what's its difference?
That's an interesting question, and one we could debate for a very long time, right? That's one of those, as I say, you have over drinks. Ironically, the term AI has been around for well over 60 years. It was coined over 60 years ago. The idea of AI was that it would emulate you, right? All of the synaptic processes, et cetera, would basically emulate Leon. So that was the original goal or concept behind it. Obviously, it did not live up to that. Partially for years, we did not have technology to support that. Partially, we did not understand the complexities associated with synaptic patterns and traversing. But the other thing is, if you look at standard technology, if you look at standard business intelligence type items, those are very good for figuring out what has happened. So my point of sale transactions were this, and some people can go, okay, if I used to use an example in class that I would use with grad students, and basically it was taking one of the large retail stores in the United States and something that's people can understand. It would determine the sales of women's purses based on geographic locations, so where a given store was, the demographics of the people that were shopping in that store, and if they introduced a new one or they changed models, what the inventorying should be for a given store in the next year. So both in determining what types of purses to put in a given store versus another store, as well as the quantity, is what we were doing out of that. The basic IT type applications will give you all of the stuff associated with performance predicated on actual sales transactions, POS transactions, point of sale transactions that you have. What it doesn't give you are a lot of the external demographics that you can start putting in to predictive models. So you can learn, is the neighborhood changing? Are weather patterns changing that impact certain things that you're trying to do? What types of external items are impacting whether or not sales are going to be at a certain level or have a certain impact. And so that's where several things come into play. One, when you start up with machine learning, the more variables that have discernible, noticeable influence are the ones that should be incorporated. If they have perfect correlation or perfect relationship, then they don't have an impact. One or the other will. But what you can determine with machine learning are those other factors that would help you get that much more or be that much more accurate in predicting your inventory needs, your pricing needs for petrol, and that type of stuff, right? So you can bring in, for example, known weather conditions that have historically happened, and you can kind of plan for weather conditions and environments, and you can base sales and inventory on some of that also. And if you're using standard IT, you're not putting all of those external factors in there. You're also picking up a lot of times with AI/ML models, you're picking up a lot of other things like social networks and other factors that also influence people's attitudes towards what it is that you're doing. So no, it's not the same. I actually have a slide shows the breakdown of all of the influencers associated with AI.
So regarding the change management or like the implementation plan, this thing. So like for the change management or to make the solution success, like the approach, I suspect it will be slightly different as well, because like the AI/ML solution is kind of evolving as well. It's not like traditional IT solution. Probably its functionality, this kind of thing, is quite static. And probably the AI/ML thing, probably the direction will change as well when we evolve in collecting more data. Like that.
So yes, it will continue to change. It will continue to evolve, and today it's starting to have a lot of PII type of implications, is it not? Visual recognition has become very, very good in many respects. And so people are starting to have major concerns over it. And there's all sorts of litigation associated with it. So AI/ML is a two-edged sword. There are lots of great advances, lots of things that are associated with it. There are also lots of ramifications for it from a privacy and a protection of individual, personal identifiable information and that type of stuff. So we are embarking upon some very interesting times.
Yeah. So in sake of time, I will ask one last question.
Okay.
So my last question, it's so far, like in your experience, like what's the most successful implementation you have done on the AI/ML? Like what's the most successful project you have done on the AI/ML space?
Oh,
and what's the reason, like why that's a project success? Because I saw a lot of failure cases, but the success one, not so many.
Oh, that's true. So I did one for an oil company, and the oil industry has gone through literally decades worth of changes. And so a lot of oil companies have what we consider potentially what's called dark data. So dark data constitutes data that a company has and they don't have any earthly idea what it is. So it could be legal documents, it could be memos, it could be seismic information, it could be satellite photos, it could be just tons of different stuff. And in cases of like this one company, they had thousands of boxes of this data stored in Iron Mountain, which is a secure place to store information. So the idea there would be to scan in all of that data and OCR it. So basically, turn it from hard copy into digital, and then go through and categorize it and convert it and get all of that value out of it, and then determine, does it need to be destroyed because there's no value in it? Does it need to be destroyed because if I have it, then litigation can be levied against me because I literally have this, and legally I can get rid of it, or it is data that I need to keep and categorize and move forward with. And then there's data that you can actually leverage that you haven't been, because from a historical perspective, you can go over a period of time, figure out changes and that type of stuff. That was a very successful environment because it took a lot of data that they were storing, had no earthly idea what they were to do with it other than paying an annual amount of money for it. And so they digitized it all, converted it, stored it, cataloged it. They were able to start leveraging some of the contracts that they'd done with other major oil companies, and then find out stuff that they were able to replicate on a much cheaper basis. So they got a lot of value add out of it too. That was very successful. The company was very happy.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Dr. Jason, to answer all these questions, and also thank you for giving a great talk today.
I enjoyed it. Thank you very much for inviting me. I had a good time. Hopefully it provided some value for a lot of folks.
Yeah, it's really insightful and helpful. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Jason. So our event, today's event will close now, and we have a monthly event, and hope to see the audience in our next month's webinar. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.